Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dadia. In this week's episode, I welcome Dr. Victoria Harris. Dr. Harris is an accredited psychotherapist who works with children and adults and is the author of children's books. For her doctorate, she researched creative techniques in psychotherapy supervision, finding them useful when experiencing a lack of clarity and discomfort, and helping with insight. She has a middle grade book series focusing on the heroine's journey and a picture book that teaches skills to regulate the body and mind. She has worked in many different settings, such as forensic, psychiatric, family services, and private practice, and helped to develop mindfulness videos for a mental health school program in Ireland. Recently, she began a YouTube channel offering guided relaxation. In this episode, Dr. Harris and I discuss the importance of play for children and the value of engagement. We explore how the lack of play and healthy attachments can adversely impact children and often lead to an inability to emotionally regulate and cope with stressful situations as children grow up. Dr. Harris and I also talk about the different forms of play children can engage in. We finally talk about the impact of screens on the development of children and the roles parents can play to support children with managing their screen times. Please find Dr. Harris on Instagram at Dr. V. Harris and online on her website at www.drvharris.com. And please leave a 5-star review at the end of the episode. I would truly appreciate it. All right, Dr. Harris, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today and wanting to have this conversation. I'm really excited, and we've been able to chat briefly offline, so I appreciate that. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and let the listeners know a little bit about what it is that you do.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be here with you and to be able to share a bit about what I do. So my name is Victoria Harris. I studied I started off studying psychology, and then I went on to train as a psychotherapist. And through my work as a psychotherapist, I became very interested in working with children because I came across people where words weren't enough, that I needed another strategy in order to meet them and to help them to express and process what was going on for them. So I started to use creative techniques, which led me to train in using creative techniques. And then as I was working, I became very interested in that. And it led me to do a doctorate in psychotherapy where I actually researched the use of creative techniques in psychotherapy. So I work with children, adolescents, and adults, but I would say my way of working is integrative, but I also would use a lot of creative strategies if it fits with the client and if they're happy to go with that, which usually they are if they've seen my bio,
Right.
and they usually come to me because I like to work that way.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And we'll definitely get into that a little bit, but you're also a published author. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit in terms of what kind of books you write?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that's another aspect. What I do is because I mean, as a child, I always liked using a creative outlet for my own feelings and emotions. And I grew up very near the town in the New Forest in England where Lewis based the main character Alice in Wonderland. The lady who used to live there, and she was buried there. So the whole town was a kind of an ode to Alice in Wonderland. So that really, and it's in the New Forest. So I was always fascinated with that story of a portal to another world. And after doing a very heavy doctorate, where it was very academic, a lot of
Yeah.
academic writing, I went straight into writing this fairy story. it was a great outlet. It was something that the story came to me very easily, and I really enjoyed the process of writing it. But because symbol and metaphor is a great vehicle
Hmm.
for healing, it was very important for me to write the story using symbol and metaphor, but with also uh, the main character having struggles with negative thought, and learning in the arc of the story how they to deal with that negative pattern of thinking, and how they learn to regulate their
Hmm.
body and their mind, as well as it's a great adventure story where they go off and it's a heroine's journey where they go off and they fight their fears, and they're in the form of various monsters, and it's that kind of classic Joseph Campbell art. But that's something that I'm very passionate about. So I'm just working on book 3. Got 2 books out, and I also wrote a children's picture book, which is also like a mini hero's journey,
Hmm.
about a badger and how they learn to regulate their body and their
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And you touched on a few things there that I want to explore further, but initially you talked about how as children, words aren't enough. And that's kind of the whole idea of that creative expression. But as we were talking offline, if often we haven't been given the tools to emotionally regulate for whatever reason, often then in our adult lives, we're constantly trying to figure that out. And we're kind of living our own hero's journey of being able to overcome some of those struggles, I suppose. But the work you do, how does creative expression help? Or is it like, do all children need that? Because I feel like in a way we do, right? As children, we don't have the tools and the skills to be able to use our words. And we're looking to the environment around us, mostly our caregivers, to get that language. But sometimes that that creative expression can take that pressure off and make it a lot easier to express ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. For the child, their language is play,
Mm,
and but you can't play if you don't feel safe. So often, if a child comes into my office and they are very anxious, they might find it difficult to use creative expression. So whereas I would tend to be more child led. Sometimes you might need to be a little bit more directive just to help them feel safer.
mhm.
So it I think it is really important to I mean, we all have an inner child. So
Yeah.
you're right. So you know, it's quite interesting to give adults the opportunity to play in therapy. And that was really something that resonated with me when I was doing my initial training. I had a therapist who was very creative, and I used to draw. She used to invite me to draw things
Mhm.
and use different ways to express myself. And when I couldn't access certain feelings and emotions or sensations, to draw it and then have that when you use a creative technique to have something, whether it's picking a symbol or using something you've drawn, to have it creates dramatic distance. So then it's easier sometimes to put out there,
Mhm.
and then you can explore it together and make sense of it after.
Right.
Like it's and in with children, if you allow them to just in a child-led way, they come in and they pick what they want to play with in the room.
Right.
Often, if they've had a trauma or something happen, there will be repetitive play. So they
Mhm.
will go in the same theme will keep coming up again and again until it's processed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could help them with that by reflecting the feeling. So even if they can't speak it, if you can put the words onto it,
Hmm.
can help shift it, or because it allows it to be seen and heard.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, you kind of talked about Joseph Campbell earlier and Carl Jung kind of, both of them talked a lot about mythologies, but there's this aspect of the unconscious that kept coming up in Carl Jung's work. Do you feel like with the aspect of play, we're tapping into that unconscious nature and letting that come out to the forefront and making something more conscious that we're not aware of, but it's coming through play where there's, to your point earlier, there's that safety, but you're also not putting that much pressure on yourself, especially if it's something traumatic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel the body is a portal to
Hmm.
the unconscious and also our imagination. So it is, and that's something I found in my research. Why were experienced psychotherapy supervisors using creative techniques in supervision? When I looked at it, it was because it works.
Mm.
It bypasses our conscious mind and it accesses something that we, in our unconscious or outside of our awareness that needs to be worked on.
Hmm.
So the fact that they used it because it was effective in doing that, it revealed something. Um, what was interesting is like, what was their motivation? And sometimes it was their motivation to reveal was actually stemming from their own discomfort.
Mm.
So because they were feeling uncomfortable, maybe the therapist was not, they were feeling that there was something unsaid in the room that may, because they're coming from a place of overseeing the work and
Hmm.
maybe their own anxiety at what was not being said was causing them discomfort. So they used it as a strategy to get to the issue.
Right.
But so we have to look at that. So, what's the power play in that? And that actually maybe it's more of a benefit to disclose our own discomfort, to be with the discomfort first, and then use the creative technique as a strategy to explore together,
Mm.
rather than using it just to reveal something. It needs to be collaborative. So that's
Right.
something that it illuminated in my research, which I found interesting.
Mm. And it's almost like a dance, right? And that's an aspect of play adults engage in. I do find it very interesting that personally I love playing sports because that's my way of getting play in and taking on new activities as well. But I think there's probably an aspect of play for people who often want to, you know, overconsume alcohol and then go dancing because there is
Yeah.
probably some underlying stress or trauma that is not coming to the surface, and that aspect of play potentially helps.
Yeah, for sure. I think we all have unhealthy ways of trying to work on work on stuff that's been pushed away. Work on. So I think it is actually really important uh, to first create that sense of safety. I guess that was something that was really important, and it's something that is really important in my work. I would work on, first of all, on creating a sense of safety in the client, and in myself, because then from that point, you can then go on to explore
Mm.
and be curious. I think it's very difficult to be curious unless you feel there's a sense of safety. Um, I think, for me, definitely writing books is a personal way for me to process
Yeah.
what's what's going on in my own journey. And I use a lot of writing with teenagers as well. So for example, I will often I have all these different symbols in the room, and inviting them to pick something that to represent themselves, or what symbol would they pick,
Hmm.
and then to talk about the symbol. So it's talked about, so it's outside of, it's in the room between us, and then explore that symbol. But then to go away, and they might have also picked symbols for different family members, and then to go away and to write a story. And it's just amazing. It's amazing what the story comes back, when they come back with the story the next week,
Hmm.
it it illustrates exactly what the issue is.
Right.
And then we can spend time exploring that and working with the story,
Mm.
if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that with journaling, I kind of get the same ability to express myself where it's non-judgmental. I'm writing down the things that are coming to me and really putting some thought. And that's really helped me on my journey, ever since I really made journaling a conscious practice on a daily basis. But I can definitely see that. Right. And
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to explore with you is as parents or caregivers, what are some things we can do for our children to create that safety and healthy expression? I know one time I suggested that my son start journaling, and I was like, yeah, you have to do this every day. And then fortunately, he came back to me and said, you know what? I don't really like this. I like drawing. So it's like, okay, well, let's get you stuff that you can use to draw. But, often we feel like just because something works for us, it may work for our child. And we force that on, which is probably having the opposite effect. And to your point, it's not creating that aspect of safety. So what can we do and how can we be more mindful?
I think it's find, like you said, find what works for them, what
Mhm.
they enjoy. It's not something that can be pushed onto. Creativity it needs to come from within. So if you're not everyone's going to be into drawing or art or arts and crafts, and not everyone's going to be into journaling or you know using symbols. So it's what works for the child, and use it could be like going for a walk on the beach and
Yeah.
asking them to, inviting them to pick, a pebble, what
Mhm.
pebble, and then explore that. What a describe, if you were to pick a pebble for you, which one would you pick? And then you pick a pebble, and then you can talk about your pebble and describe it in 3 words, and then they can describe theirs. So it's just allowing the expression,
Mm.
and for you to then, as a parent, to listen. Listening skills are so important. I mean, it's something we learn as a psychotherapist. One of the first things you learn is how to listen.
Mm.
Without because sometimes we want to. Uh, we want to impose ourselves or say something. So listening skills, and just to listen and reflect back what they've said,
Right.
so that they feel seen and heard.
Hmm.
And it's as simple as that. So holding the space is so important.
Yeah.
So it's finding what works for them, and it might be music. What's their favorite? What's their favorite, tune at the moment, and what is it about that, or their lyrics that they like, or a lot of my teenage clients love the insight card. Like, sort of inviting them to pick a card. Often at the end of a session, I'll invite them to pick a card, and they have lots of different, and they'll pick, the which deck they want, and they pick a card, and they talk about how it relates to them, or how they feel about the card, and there'll be a whole discussion around that.
Right.
It's anything that that can be used to allow them to express themselves, and for you as a parent to just listen
Mm.
and reflect back, so and hold the space for them.
Right. And then we were talking offline about the importance of attunement, right? And that's so
Yeah.
important. And I was referring to the book I'm reading, the When the Body Says No. There's that aspect of emotional regulation, the skills and the tools that children learn early. And a huge component of it is attunement. as parents. And if that's not present, even if we're physically present and we're spending time with them, if we're not attuning to their emotions, they're not getting those skills, they're not feeling understood or seen or heard, as you said. And that can often cause problems in adult life, whether it's through their own relationships or how they believe they are seen in the world. And that can lead to other stressors in life. And it's such a huge thing to focus on as caregivers is, often myself included, I feel like, oh, if I'm just physically present, I'm doing all the right things. Or if I'm just engaging my son in activities, I'm doing the right things. But no, it's understanding his emotions and listening. And often I, try to force things I feel like are in his bet, beneficial for him. And that also can be often, uh, can have negative consequences.
Though we can only do our best
Yeah.
and we can only be good enough. And if you ask my children, they would, have lots of complaints about me. I think I always remember when I was doing the training and I am for creative play therapy and
Yeah.
creative techniques. And I was pregnant at the time and someone turned around to me and they had more grown up children. They said, "Oh, you're so lucky you're learning all this now. You're going to be a fantastic parent." And I was like, "Oh, pat myself on the back." Uh, but, and then it happens to you.
Right. Yeah.
And, the thing is, the most important thing is learning to regulate yourself
Mhm.
as a parent, because there's going to be times it's going to be very challenging. You're going to, you're going to, all your buttons are going to be pressed. Uh, all your struggles are going to bubble up to the surface. And all you can do is hang on. And I think if we can convey regulation and the skills and then rupture and repair. So if you haven't, if you have had an outburst and you haven't been the perfect parent and that's a rupture, it's okay to say, "Look, I'm really sorry,
Mhm.
like mommy didn't deal with that well and I'm sorry, and, I'm not, I'm not, I didn't handle that well, but, I'm really sorry. And this was, and repair it
Mhm.
and say, and I think that's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think if you can learn to regulate and if you can, um, then be curious about what it is, if you are, activated, if you notice yourself being activated by, behavior in your child, and this also, could be said of partners or family, what is that about?
Mm.
Reflect on it, journal on it, use creative expression. Um, and I think that's the most important thing that you can do. And then use, um, working with the body. For myself, I think my own, yoga practice,
Mhm.
breathing technique, um, meditation has been very useful. But I think it's been learning to ground myself. So
Right.
knowing when I'm activated, knowing what I need to do. Even yes, I mean, I've started doing personal therapy again because I think it's important as a therapist to go, to keep doing your personal development.
Yeah.
And today, I was talking about something from my very early 20s and I felt my whole body activate and I
Mhm.
was shaking, but I knew that it was a feeling, it was an emotion that had been stuck in there and it
Right.
needed to be expressed. So I just breathed through it, grounded, put my feet on the ground. And because it was a safe space with my therapist, it was able to come up and it was able to pass through me.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think, we need to be kind to ourselves as well. Sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things in my picture book. So it was about what are the things that the Benny the Badger learns? He learns kind self-talk. He
Mm,
learned belly breathe and he learned the importance of community and talking and feeling um, your community and who you have around you. And knowing that there are going to be emotional storms, but
mhm,
you beginning and a middle and an end, and that you can, we can't be free. We can't expect to, I think sometimes people say, I want to be healed. And for them, that means that they're not going to feel difficult feelings, emotions, thoughts, sensations. But it's not about that. Healing isn't about that. It's about knowing that you can have all that and experience the intensity of life, but that it's okay.
right.
But you know, you can have that and you can feel free and at peace.
Hmm.
It's an
Yeah.
either or.
Yeah. And I appreciate all that because I think, you touched on three main themes there. There's obviously that aspect of having grace for ourselves as individuals. And to your point, being kind from that regard. And then there's that aspect of also regulating ourselves. So some of the things you mentioned, whether it's yoga or breathing, I definitely find breath work has really helped my ability to emotionally regulate. So even when stressors come up or something comes up, I'm not having any outbursts, which obviously can have an impact on our children. But through that, through those practices, then we're able to role model for our children,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
whether if we fall short of where our own aspirations as parents, we're able to even role model repair. So then they can also grow up and understand that you will have conflict, you will have challenges along the way, but you should also have the skill sets to be able to apologize and repair. And I think all of those things are so important that you touched on.
Yeah, I think and children are very, very sensitive to even an expression on your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can tell if you're activated. So it's yeah, if we can learn that in ourselves, then we will be modeling it to them. And
Mhm.
if we can learn that, if we can show that sometimes we don't get it right, but it's okay and that we can repair, we're
Yeah.
also modeling that. And if we can face our challenges and difficult, discomfort, and we're also modeling that because most of the time we don't want to feel discomfort.
Mhm.
And that's another thing that my research showed that, you can have as many letters after your name as you want, but as
Right.
human beings, we don't like discomfort. So our natural reaction is to push it away, to push it down, to push it onto somebody else.
Mhm.
But actually, what we need to do is we need to hold it and be with it and allow it uh, to pass through us.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. The other area when it comes to children is this whole idea of autonomy, right? And there's this aspect that sometimes we try to control their environment too much or we're too far removed. There's obviously a healthy balance there, but what are your thoughts around being able to equip children with the appropriate amount of autonomy so then they can grow up to be independent adults?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, every families and every parents are going to have different ideas about, and I think it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And I think for what's right for one family is not going to be right for another
Mhm.
person. I think it is important to give them a sense of autonomy, um, but that's very challenging as a parent.
Right. Yeah.
It's important for us to reflect as parents on what is it a safe amount? What's So it depends what it is really, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And is it one need to control and protect? Is that coming from our own needs?
Yeah.
Is so who's benefiting from that? Who's
Yes.
inner child? Is it my inner child that wants to is struggling, or is this the appropriate amount uh, of minding for my child because it's not safe?
Hmm.
So it's trying to figure that out. So um, uh, yeah, it depends on the situation. I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very specific.
Right, and you touched on a very crucial point too, is it our own need for control, or is it actually, to your point, in the real benefit of the child? Because I feel like often it's our own emotional attachment to the child that could be getting in the way, and or the I guess even the narrative we created in our head that, oh, what will that say about me as a parent if I'm giving this much freedom to my child? Or if the child gets hurt, how am I going to feel? And sometimes children need those experiences to, again, become a part of this world, getting hurt. And
Yeah.
it's such a fine balance, like you said, but I think it is a struggle for a lot of parents, and it's very situation dependent.
It is, and it's a different world now to what it used to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
It depends on culture as well. So there are so many different factors. Uh, but I think it's always useful to reflect, to self-reflect as a parent. Who is this serving? Is this my own? Is this something? Is this my own fear,
Hmm.
or is this serving me, or is it serving the child?
Right. Right. And to your point, it being a different world, especially now with children having access to social media, what are your thoughts around that? And, in terms of the work you do as well?
Well, um, in terms of social media, I think I'm in favor of making sure you always have the security to make sure that, if I know that children are having phones and at much younger age, but in terms of security, make sure that you have that on the phone so that they don't have, and so you can control the app, you can
Hmm.
control the screen time until they're old enough to be able to do that and self-regulate.
Hmm.
And yeah, because yeah, I mean that's something I mean it's a household issue with us, but we've always been strict to have all the kind of to use the apps that monitor and make sure that that there's no free access to the internet,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we can see what's going on and put limits on certain things. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's something that's definitely that needs to be kept. You have to keep it's family specific.
Yeah.
Uh, Right. And that's the thing. What you do, you might put all the limits on your children's phone and then they go to school and then their friend doesn't have the limits on their phone. So the thing is they're going to see stuff. So
Hmm.
I'm always in favor of getting in there early and
Right.
talking to the children at a child appropriate in a child appropriate age appropriate way.
Hmm.
There's sometimes there might be stuff that they are exposed to that might give them a fright and that they won't feel right about. Because I have had children as young as 8 being exposed to extreme porn, for
Hmm.
example, that come into the office. So I'm in favor of having difficult conversations in an age appropriate way,
Right.
just to prepare children and so that they understand that they can always come to you,
Yeah.
that you're not going to be mad at them, that it's okay, that there's stuff out there that, will give them a fright, you know, and that's how for younger children, that's how I put it, just in case there was ever a time they saw something. And this has happened, I've had children who have been exposed to something, but they've been too afraid to talk to their parents about it. And it's been, it's caused a lot of suffering. So I'm always in favor of having difficult conversations, but in an age appropriate way,
Right.
so that they can always come to you.
Hmm. And it's
To
to your point again, it's creating that safety for the children also to feel safe to be able to have those conversations or even approach parents. Because with the access nowadays, there is a lot of source for trauma, whether it's classroom bullying now that can extend past the classroom, can follow you
Yes,
home, or some of the things you may see online that, obviously, especially with social media, it's hard to maintain those filters at times and you don't know what's going to
yeah,
squeak through.
exactly. There's a lot of content out, and I think it's important to, and you know, children's brains are not able to decipher and discriminate between content, and it's
Right.
getting even more confusing now with the content coming out. So it's important to have those conversations that not everything they see is real.
Hmm.
Uh, some things are very, to have. I think it's important to keep having those family
Yeah.
conversations, and I think sometimes adults can find those conversations difficult themselves, but it is really important to keep the conversation open. And sometimes the kids, mine two are teenagers now, and they roll their eyes, oh, they're not talking about that again. But it means that it's an open conversation. They know that they can always come
Right.
to us if they need to.
Yeah, and it's so important to have that open two-way communication because then if they don't have the parents to come to, they don't really have they may go somewhere else or they may just suppress it with neither of which are good options, right? Because you don't know
Yeah.
where they're going to end up asking questions. So I agree with you, and I appreciate that too. And I guess one of the last questions I had was with the amount of screen time, because I also see it with my son. Do you feel like that outlet has impacted children's creative expression?
I think it's a different. I mean, there are just observing my own children. I mean, I have got one of my children. I mean, loves to build things.
Mhm.
So in that respect, that's extremely creative. That you
Right.
get to build a house and build a world, and it's just a different way of doing it, isn't it? So,
Yeah,
and then so I think things are changing, things are shifting,
yeah,
and creativity maybe is expressed in a slightly different way.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I see it with a lot of kids creating videos on YouTube and stuff. That
Yeah.
is definitely a different form of expression. But I just often wonder with the games they're playing or just binging on videos or Netflix for that matter, are they actually able to process things in their head and do something with it, right? And I don't know what the right answer is because obviously
Mm.
we're always evolving as a species, but I often wonder, right? And um, yeah,
And it's fascinating, and there hasn't, to be honest, there hasn't, there needs to be more research on it.
mhm,
Um, but definitely, it's had an impact, and I don't know if I look, they know a lot more.
yeah,
My 14-year-old said, "No, so much, like, no, the access to knowledge now is amazing." I mean, mm, if you think you can have so much, you can have access to anything, all this knowledge and history and arts and culture, it's amazing.
mhm,
So in that way, it's enriching.
right,
So it's about balance.
yeah,
I do. But so on the one hand, for example, with him, like, he knows so much, and maybe it brings on maturity in a different way a lot quicker. But like equally, he'll love to run around a field in the west of Ireland, making a
yeah,
den.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it's finding that right balance because I was talking to my friends earlier this week too. For me to strike that balance it's often taking my son out in nature where he's disconnected from everything
Yeah.
and he's able to ground himself, or at least both of us are able to ground ourselves. It was kind of good for me to disconnect too. But yeah, and then it's funny, the conversation we had were a lot more in depth versus us being at home where, the screens often get in the way. So yeah, I
Like,
agree.
definitely nature's a healer, and
Yeah.
I think if you can find time to get outdoors, go for a walk, do whatever, go to the beach, just be in a park, you
Yeah.
know, around nature, um, that's definitely healing. And even, as a parent, to do something with your child out in nature, and it doesn't have to be for long, you know,
Yeah.
go for the bike ride, uh, whatever it is, just to get out.
Yeah.
And so but those are the times where you can have the most natural conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And you're very, you know, lucky to be in Ireland to be around all kinds of amazing natural beauty. So I've been able to experience it personally too, but uh very, very fortunate. But
Yeah, that's a challenge for people living in cities, but it's, I suppose, get to the park. You know,
mhm,
there's always a lovely park, and even just going for a walk in the park, playing football, whatever it is, just to have those moments of play
mhm,
with your child, where
yes.
it is where you're all off devices and you're just playing. Because, that's what we've all, if you look at animals, they love to play.
Mhm,
No? So we're the same. We build connection through play.
yeah.
So we find pockets of time, to do that, to get out and connect through play.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. Yeah. Social connection and play are very important for us. Um, Dr. Harris, thank you so much for coming on
Thank
here and having this conversation with me. I'm really grateful. I do, I want to give listeners an opportunity if they want to get a hold of you or find you online. What are some ways they can do that?
They can check out my Instagram at Dr. V Harris. I am also at drvharris.com, and that's my website. And I've got a YouTube channel which where I do kind of mindfulness meditation, both for adults and for children, which I'm hoping to expand as well. You can catch me on that.
Yeah, I'll put all of that in the show notes, but thank you again. Thank you for coming
Yeah.
on here. Yeah,
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
likewise. Thank you for checking out this episode with Dr. Harris. As always, please leave a review or a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That's the best way to support this podcast. Thank you, and until next week.